This aircraft was developed originally as a high-speed airliner or mail carrier in the early 1930s. It was later modified to fit the German Schnellbomber or fast bomber concept of the time. Though the plane was designed to be fast and nimble, later this led to its downfall, as quite early in the war its bomb load and range proved to be inadequate. So let's see the history of the Dornier Do. The story of this aircraft starts in 1932, when the first specifications were sent to Dornier to design a high-speed mail plane for the German Lufthansa, which needed to be able to carry light loads or 6 passengers. In the next year, the newly formed RLM issued the designation Do-17 for the planned aircraft and ordered the first prototypes. At the end of the same year, they issued new specifications for a new, high-speed cargo aircraft with special equipment. This of course meant military applications, but as many other German aircraft developed in the early 1930s, it was disguised as a civilian design, as Germany under the Versailles Treaty was not allowed to build bombers. The same happened with the Heinkel HG-111, which started its life as a passenger plane, and the first models entered service with the Lufthansa as airliners. But as it's well known by now, later it became the main German bomber of World War II. If you want to know more about the HG-111, I have already made a video on that aircraft, so go check it out. The original design of the Do-17 featured a conventional single tail, and they kept working on the first prototype even though wind tunnel tests showed some problems with the stability. But in parallel, work started on a dual tail variation as well. The first prototype, still featuring the original tail, was finished in November 1934, and made its maiden flight at the end of the month. The aircraft used 2 BMW inline engines, each of them producing 750 horsepower. Landing accidents slowed down the testing, as the landing gear continuously caused problems, as it collapsed twice, damaging the aircraft. The second prototype was finished in May 1935, and featured the new modified twin tail, and the V1 and V2 were tested and evaluated together by the RLM. The next V3 model also used the twin tail design. The Lufthansa tested the new plane in October the same year, but the results of the tests were different from what Dornier wanted. The type was actually rejected by the Lufthansa, as the plane was too cramped for passengers thanks to its narrow fuselage, and its operating costs were too high. It seemed this will be the end of the project, and the 3 prototypes were put in storage. But a few months later, a Lufthansa pilot, who was a Dornier employee as well, flew one of the prototypes and experienced how nimble it was, and he stated it would make a great fast bomber. Word about his experience made its way into the RLM, and more prototypes were ordered. The planes were tested extensively again, but now for a completely different goal, as potential bomber candidates. During 1936, several different prototypes were tested. Though the V1 crashed in December 1935, the V2 model, now converted to military specifications, started its test in May 1936. The V5 prototype was built with Hispano-Suiza engines, but all the other prototype models used the original BMW engines, except the V12 and V13, which were testbeds for the Daimler DB600 engines. The testing showed good flight characteristics, and the RLM decided to place a production order for the type. The V9 prototype was selected as the base for the first Do-17E production series, which entered service mid-1937. But several additional prototypes were built up to that point, the last one being the V21. Though the most well-known version of the Do-17 is the late model Z variant with its short glazed nose. But the early models were much more conventional, and the signature look only appeared after the first combat experiences with the type. The first E1 variant featured 2 machine guns as defensive armament, and was able to carry 500 kg of bomb load. It was equipped with 2 BMW inline engines, and the top speed of this model was 330 km an hour. Its reconnaissance variant, the Do-17 F1, was very similar to the E1, but it featured cameras on the bottom of the fuselage. The V8 prototype variant, renamed MV1 and using 1000 horsepower Daimler DB600 engines, performed a high-speed test on July 1937 in Switzerland at the military aircraft competition, reaching a top speed of 457 km an hour. Though this model was modified for speed demonstration, its performance was still very successful and led to many foreign orders. Only the MV1 model used the Daimler engines, and the following MV2 and MV3 were built with the Bramo 323 radial engines. These variants became the prototypes for the Do-17M version, after the decision that the Daimler engines should be reserved for fighter planes. This led to the creation of the Do-17M bomber variant and the Do-17P reconnaissance variants, both using the Bramo radial engines. The M variant featured one additional machine gun compared to the E version, and its bomb load was raised to 1000 kilograms. The next S and U variants were both used the Daimler DB601 engines, but both were very limited series. They featured the new redesigned airframe, where the cockpit was raised and more glazed for better visibility, and the nose of the aircraft shortened and also extensively glazed. Only 3 were built from the S variant and 12 from the 5-seat U variant. Interestingly, the export version of the plane, the Do-215, was upgraded with 1075 horsepower Daimler DB601 engines. These improved the performance substantially, but these variants actually never reached the buyers, as the Luftwaffe took over these deliveries. The next Z variant used a redesigned airframe, but reverted back to the 900 horsepower Bramo 323A1 engines, and featured a 4th crew member and an additional defensive machine gun in an underbelly gondola. However, the added weight on the Z1 version led to its being underpowered, and thus the bomb load was cut back to 500 kilograms. But it was quickly followed by the Z2 variant featuring the newer Bramo 323P1 engines, producing 1000 horsepower each, and the bomb load was raised back to the full 1000 kilogram again, and the defensive armament was now 6 machine guns. Though having only 4 crew members, these cannot all fire at the same time. The Z3 variant featured 2 automatic cameras for reconnaissance flights and 500 kilograms of bomb load. The Z4 was a trainer version, and the Z5 was similar to the Z3 but with added flotation equipment. The Z7 and Z10 variants became night fighter versions. The Z7 featured the solid nose section of the Ju-88C, as the cross-section of the Do-17 and the Ju-88 was very similar. It mounted 3 7.92mm machine guns and one 20mm cannon, but this variant was very short-lived, and the following Z10 received a completely new nose, mounting 4 machine guns and 2 20mm cannons. Still, only 9 of these were built. The Do-17 was 15.8 meters long, with a wingspan of 18 meters. It had an empty weight of 5,210 kilograms, and a maximum takeoff weight of 8,839 kilograms. It used 2 Bramo 323P radial engines, producing 1,000 horsepower each. With these engines, it could reach a top speed of 410 km an hour and a cruise speed of 300 km an hour. It had a combat range of 660 km with a full bomb load, or 1000 km with 500 kg of bombs. The service ceiling of the plane was 8,200 meters. Its defensive armament consisted of 6 machine guns, and its maximum bomb load was 1000 kg. The mass production of the type started in late 1936, and the first plane started to arrive to the units in early 1937. Soon after, in March, the first Do-17s already arrived to Spain as a combat test in support of the nationalist forces. In this conflict, the bombers fared well, as their speed was high enough to avoid most fighter planes, but still their first loss happened in April, when a Republican side I-15 shot down one of them. The experiences in Spain showed the need for stronger defensive armament and several other modifications. This led to the creation of the short-lived S variant in 1938, with a redesigned fuselage featuring a more bulged lower section to accommodate a crew member and a rearward-firing machine gun. The shorter nose received extensive glazing, and the cockpit was raised and more glazed for better visibility. But the Spanish Civil War also showed the shortcomings of the Do-17, as the HG-111, similarly tested in the conflict, was just as fast as the Dornier plane, but its bomb load was almost 2 times more, depending on the variant. The short-lived S variant was quickly followed by the Z version, which became the definitive DO-17. When World War II broke out, the units using the type were equipped with a mixture of M and Z models. They were heavily used in Poland, mostly in low-level attacks, as the more robust radial engine made the type less vulnerable in low-level missions. Some of them flew on the attack on Norway, but the next larger-scale operation they participated in was the invasion of France and the Low Countries. In these operations, the DO-17s were used heavily, attacking airfields, communication centers, and supply depots. After the Battle of France was over, the type was used again during the Battle of Britain, first attacking shipping over the Channel in July and August, then they switched over attacking airfields and radar installations on the east coast of England. The Dorniers again were used in low-level attacks, and they destroyed many British planes on the ground, but also suffered considerable losses in their missions. During the operation against the British was the first time the Dorniers, just like most German planes, encountered top-of-the-line fighters, like the Spitfires and Hurricanes, which with their high speed and heavy armament caused a lot of losses to the German bomber formations. Altogether, some 150 DO-17s were lost during the Battle of Britain. By mid-1940, the production of the DO-17 stopped, as the more modern Ju-88 and DO-217 entered service, but the type still remained in use. Similarly to many German aircraft that became obsolete and suffered losses in the Western Front, the Dorniers were used on the Balkans and the Eastern Front, where they faced less opposition in the air. Over the Balkans, in April 1941, 102 of them participated in the attack against Belgrade. They also took part in the Battle of Crete in May the same year. By the time of Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, most units converted to the newer Ju-88 models, and only a few DO-17 stayed in frontline service. They still found some success at the end of June, when enjoying the German air superiority, they attacked the Soviet forces preparing for a counterattack. But again, their limited bomb load and range meant the days of the DO-17s were numbered, and they were slowly phased out from the bomber role. The remaining planes were still used, but not for combat operations, but as training aircraft and as glider tugs. They also participated in testing new technologies, like the Z model on the picture, carrying an experimental ramjet engine. The last DO-17 units participating in combat operations were the night fighter variants, which stayed in service until early 1943. Other nations that used the DO-17 included Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Finland, Hungary, Romania, Italy, Spain, and interestingly the United Kingdom, who used two captured DO-17s, which originally were used by King Peter to escape Yugoslavia. Originally this aircraft was built for speed, and later pressed into combat role because of its performance. But it was a victim of its own design, as it couldn't carry enough ordnance, and its short range was a big drawback. It was quickly overtaken by more advanced designs during World War II, but nonetheless it was an interesting aircraft. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.